week, we gave ourselves the gift of our very first part of the Evergreen Mystery Quilt Along. Now let's branch out and move to part 2. Download the free pattern for part 2 at Fact Quarter Shop. And don't worry if you're just now joining. The pattern for part 1 is still free on our site. The fabric we're using for this quilt is Favorite Things by Sherry and Chelsea from Moda. And make sure to subscribe so you can see all the free portions of this quilt. Let's get sewing. So when you download, you're going to see your fabric A and B are your backgrounds, your light green is your tree, your dark green is going to be your accent to your tree, and your fabric I and J are going to come from your layer cake. You're going to make those with 2 fabric Fs and 2 fabric Is. Now what you want to do is, if you want to make them the traditional way, you'll just follow these instructions super easy. I like to use triangle paper anytime that I am doing half square triangles. So this measures 2 by 2 unfinished, so that means I need 1.5 finished, and you can follow that using our half square triangle cheat sheet, but H150 is the triangle paper you need from Triangles on a Roll. So what I'm going to do is, the first step is to make sure you have your fabrics right sides together. Place your triangle paper on top. We're going to stitch on the dashed line, and you're going to use a super short stitch length. So whatever stitch length you normally use, just use slightly smaller. So from here, we're just going to trim on the solid lines. And the more accurate you cut and the more accurate you sew, the more accurate half square triangles you will get. And then I'm going to cut in the center and cut this. And then this gives you 4 half square triangles, just like the other method. It's just slightly faster to do this method. Now from here, if you stitched with a really short stitch length, this paper will just almost fall off. And then from here, we're going to have 4 of these, and we're going to press toward the red fabric. I set my seam, and when I press these, I'm going to press them all on top of each other. And that kind of just gets them flatter and flatter. Now from here, I'm going to cut these little, I call them dog ears, and you just want to make sure when you cut, you don't cut like this. You have to cut the full amount or it will get in your seam later. So you'll cut those off, and then we're going to build a pinwheel unit. So from here, I'm going to follow step 2, and I'm just going to pay attention to the placement of the red. And usually when I lay this out, I usually don't get it right the first time. So I have to double check. And what we're going to do is sew down here with a 1/4 inch seam, press, and then sew the last seam. So to start, put these together, and your seam will nest. You'll be able to feel it. And I'm going to chain sew this together. First, you'll change to a 1/4 inch foot. Now from here, I'm going to leave this chain together. I'm going to press each to different directions. So one to the green, the other to the green. As long as they're opposing, it'll be fine. Now from here, I'm going to put these right sides together. I'm going to pin each end. So we'll see when we sew it if it lines up. And again, just a 1/4 inch seam. So from here, press that direction, and you can see everything lines up. And this should be 3.5 by 3.5. So what I'm going to do is make sure it is 3.5. And I'm going to take a Creative Grids ruler, and there are white lines in the center, and I'm going to put that white line on this seam, and it does measure 3.5. I'm just going to kind of trim around just to make sure it's not bigger than 3.5. And it came out pretty accurate. So now we're going to take this one. This is our first pinwheel unit. We're going to put this on our board, and we're going to attach fabric C rectangles to each side. Now your pinwheel, when you turn it, it doesn't matter because they all are the same. So you don't have to pay attention to the direction it is. And I'm going to pin this in place, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and then at the sewing machine, I'm going to add the second fabric C. So from here, you can just pin the next one while you're at the machine and just sew it down. Now from here, you've got 2 seams. I'm gonna set this one first, press toward the green, and do the same thing on the other side. And this is the top of your tree for part 2, so we'll kind of put this up here. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to skip the next 2 sections and just talk about the next pinwheels and do this section next, just because they kind of go together. So if you do the same exact thing we just did with your fabric M and your remaining fabric I's, this time there's going to be 4 squares each instead of 2, so you can make 8 half square triangles using the traditional method, or you can make 8 half square triangles using triangle paper. Either way will work. You're going to make those, and then you're going to turn them the same exact way into your second pinwheel unit. So from here, once you've got your pinwheels, you're going to put fabric L's on the outside, and this is going to be your accent fabric, and your fabric K on the inside. So what I'm going to do is just have you, I'm going to actually pin this whole row together. Because these are 3.5 inches, they're not going to join into each other. So I'm just going to pin the whole thing, and we'll just sew them all at one time and then press. So you just keep building. And so just, you're just going to sew and keep the other seams out of your way when you do. Just set your seams, and then you're going to press toward the dark green. And then this is actually going to be the bottom of your tree unit. So I'm going to put this aside and we'll come back to these. Now that we worked on our pinwheels, we're going to do really simple 4 patches. I don't recommend strip piecing for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 4 of these. I'm going to show you how to make 1. What you want to do is you want your stripes to go the same direction. You either put them just like this or you put them like this. Either way will work. It's going to come out the same way, but you want all 4 to go the same direction. So I'm going to pin these 2. Set your seam and press toward the green. Just pin in the center. Your seam will nest, and then pin on each side. But you're going to make 4 of these. And when you do that, you want all of them with the stripes going the same way. Now that's going to look really nice in a second when we put them into rows. You could just put the stripes any which way. I just think it kind of will look busy when your quilt is done. So now that we have these done, we're going to make our middle tree unit. And that's going to be with fabric E's on the ends, and then your D's, and then you're going to place your stripes, or you're going to place your pieces in order. And what that's going to give you is it's going to give you 2 stripes going one way, 2 stripes going the other, and I think that looks really nice, and it's going to look really nice with those pinwheels we just did at the top and the bottom. So from here, I'm going to do that same thing where we just pin the whole thing together to save time. But on something like this, it's very helpful because it keeps the stripes in the same place, and you don't have to worry about it when you come back because you know that you pinned it all at one time and it will all go together easily. So here you're just going to sew each little section one at a time, but doing it this way will keep your stripes going the same way, and it'll be less likely for an error to occur. Now here you may be tempted to just press all one direction, but you don't want to do that because your seams need to nest. And you may be tempted to not set your seams, but I'm going to set all my seams, especially since you're going in a row. It's going to be a lot less wavy if you do it this way. And just start on one end and press toward the green. So here's your row, and you just want to make sure that your row, when you put it together, is this way and not upside down because they are different. So now we're going to start assembling our tree unit. We're going to move our fabric A's out of the way and our fabric B's out of the way for now. We're going to be on the top of page 3, and we're going to put our fabric G strip on the very top. Then we're going to put our 4-patch row and then our bottom row. And again, you're just gonna look and make sure that you've got your 4 patches the same way, you've got your darker accent pinwheels on the bottom and your lighter on top. And then the best way to do this is to sew these 2 together and these 2 together first. So I'm gonna put these right sides together, and everything should nest if you pressed according to the pattern. And we're gonna pin this, and then we're gonna pin this one. So to attach the top 2, what I will do is find the center and match up my centers, since these don't have seams to line up. And then you just sew both of these long seams with a 1/4 inch seam. Now from here, you're going to set this seam, press toward the light green, and here you just want to make sure, hopefully you didn't chop off those points. This one I'm going to press from this side. I'm going to press toward the dark green, which is my bottom row, and hopefully these seams are not chopped off. And then we're going to sew these 2 together, and here these seams nest, so I'm going to pin here, here, and then throughout, and we'll be almost done. And luckily everything is kind of lining up. All my points are matching, but if they don't, you know, you don't have to fix it if you don't want to. So now, similar to part 1, we're basically going to take our fabric A squares and do the same thing we did on part 1, where we draw a line, add them to the top left and top right corners, stitch on the line, and press. So you're going to put one here, and of course I'm going to pin, 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 and then move and get that step done. So just so you know, when you sew here, this should line up right here, but I ignore that, and I'm gonna stitch my line and hope it works, and if it doesn't, then adjust the line. I feel like it's too much to try to figure out if it matches from the front, but if you are a magician and can get that to work, you can definitely do that. But this is the way I do it, and we'll see. The first time, one lined up and one didn't, so we'll see this time what happens. Now we're gonna look, and that one's a little bit off, and that one matches. So it's kind of like the first one. So what I need to do here is just, if I want this to match, is just stitch a little bit more to the left. You don't have to fix that if you don't want to, but it's gonna be about right here. So what I'm gonna do is, at the sewing machine, I'm gonna start stitching over my previous stitches, go a little bit to the left, and then come back to the line. So you can see right here, I just went slightly to the left and back down, and now it matches. So that, doing this step is totally up to you if you want to do the extra effort to do that or not. Trim a 1/4 inch away, and we're going to press these toward the fabric A. Now from here, we're almost done. We're going to add our fabric B's to the left and the right. So we'll attach the fabric B's to the left and right and press toward the white. And I think the hardest part here is just making sure you've got your white on the right side. So this is a really cute white on white with a little daisy. And sometimes those are hard to get going the right direction since the print is very dainty and light. So right here, your points should line up and they look good. So what I'm going to do is just trim, just to kind of square up the block, get any loose ends off. And when you're doing this, just make sure you're not chopping any of your points off on the pinwheels. When this is done, your row should be 9.5 by 27.5. So now we have part 2 of our Evergreen Mystery Quilt Along finished. It's so cute. And if you can't tell, it is second to the bottom. Make sure to share so I can see how your trees are coming along, and join me next week for part 3. See you there.